companies that actually pay their levies to us send their workplace skills plans, right? That has a lot of reasons. There's a lot of smaller companies. It will probably cost them more just to employ someone to do it. It's a fairly arduous and bureaucratic exercise. I'm going to be honest. We don't have much choice in it. We need a lot of data. Then also from our side, I'm not going to lie, we are not very good with informing industry of what exactly goes into it. We have not done training of HR departments in our sector for a while, something we are getting back into. But ultimately, our skills levy comes from industry. If we don't get the data from industry, how can we expect to actually service them if we don't really know what's going on? Hence why, of course, we do the desktop research and we engage and we come to these kind of forums, right? Then, that's a personal one maybe that I have found. I came from a provincial office before I joined the national office. And, you know, what in the Western Cape was required is not necessarily what the National Development Plan wants. Right? And maybe the Western Cape also is a little bit of an extreme example when it comes to provincial versus national. But I also found in the Free State it was similar, because the demands are different in the various provinces, and yet we are guided by national imperatives. So a lot of times at provincial forums, people feel we are not at all contributing to what they require at the local level, which for us is a big challenge. We are now putting up regional offices, very much so. We just had an induction with all the regional staff, and I hope that we get a lot more input from them and that we can plan around this a little bit more as they become stronger. Then municipalities, I put it under lack of sector representative data, but municipalities send their WSPs to local government SETA. Now, municipalities, undoubtedly for us, are obviously a major stakeholder and in major need in a lot of these intermediary skills, and I would think as a group are probably the major people that employ the people we pay for it to get trained at TVET colleges, right? Now, we don't get the data. It's very difficult to get the data from EWSETA because ultimately what happens is that EWSETA collects for the entire municipality and they don't necessarily break it down for the WSA and all of that. So, but we only need the very tiny water sector part, right? So that's why I put it under lack of representative data. Having said that, we are working closer and closer with them and we're having more and more meetings so we can actually increase that. And it must be said, EWSETA is fairly strong in the water sector. Then, lack of project implementation. I spoke about it. There are a lot of different partners at the local level. A lot of things can go wrong. And also our M&E definitely needs to become better so we can actually detect early warning signs in projects. Lack of industry buy-in. It was also mentioned by the department. Work integrated learning is a major one for us. Giving people that first work experience, right, it's crucial. A lot of the water sectors, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I think it's also a huge issue in terms of who we train and who owns some of these businesses, and I think there's a lot of issues around some of these cultural boundaries. Now, what we're trying to do we're having a workshop in October with some of our key industry players. We're partnering with the National Business Initiative to actually clear up some of these challenges, right? So we want to invite the Department of Labor because a lot of employers, they're very afraid suddenly they have all these interns paid by government and then the unions get involved. So we want to actually, for them to hear from the horse's mouth exactly how it works. Then, historic legacies, you know, it was also mentioned by the department, and I'm glad we're on the same page. Skilled people without qualifications, so that's where the recognition of prior learning comes in. Organizing framework for occupations, the codes, we're addressing that. We're sitting also on the reference group, that project, as well as budget constraints. So the way it works, right, is that each SETA gets the levies that their sector pays to them. Now, personally, I consider the energy and water sector one of the most important sectors in the country, okay, because they support every other industry, right? I think a lot of reports have stated it, 70% of all jobs are water dependent, right? Never mind energy dependent. Now, the energy and water sector are very poor sectors, right? We are not manufacturing, we are not mining. And I actually tried to find out which SETA, where we actually stand. I think we are literally like in the bottom 5. Also, if the SETA, if we were to allocate our funding according to what we get from the water sector versus what we get from the energy sector, let me tell you, we would be in even bigger trouble as the water sector because we are heavily subsidizing our activities with the energy income we are getting. I mean, it's something out of the 1,700 people that actually pay their levies, which, by the way, is ridiculous compared to other SETAs, right? Something like 250 are water sector. So it's tiny, tiny. And the money we get is also not very big. So that's what I mean in terms of budget constraints. Also, for example, what that means, right? We are allowed to use 10% of the levies we get for administration. So that means salaries, it means travel costs, so any of these kind of things. Now 10% of whatever budget you have, so if you're a huge SETA, right, you can have a huge staff complement, and if you are us, you have an extremely tiny staff complement, right? It's a huge issue for us. We always overshoot our administration budget. Every year you come to our AGM, that's a reality. If you go to SETA, the manufacturing and engineering, let me tell you, they're always under budget. I mean, it's like we sit there and it's different worlds, right? So maybe just to also highlight where some of these issues come from and that they're extremely systemic, right? They're completely out of our hand. That's from me. Oh, I actually wanted to respond to some of the things that the department said. I think the WIL workshop responds maybe to some of the work integrated learning things. I also hope that the review of the National Skills Development Strategy, which now will go into its 4th edition starting March 2018, is very much aimed at greater alignment also between the various SETAs. Then, in terms of retention, we now joined the IWA Specialist Group Workforce, what is it called now? Workforce, I can't remember the full title. But basically they are looking specifically at coming up with retention policies for the water sector, specifically for water boards. So we hope that we can kind of contribute and partner there, because I also think it's a huge issue. And mapping, I actually regret I didn't put it in, but we just finished so I work in the stakeholder engagement and collaboration branch, and we just finished our stakeholder mapping exercise. And we had to make some fairly harsh concessions, and not everyone's going to like it. That's the problem with mapping, which is why I think a lot of government departments shy away, because as soon as you publish it, some partners might fall in the not very important partners section. So we are constantly going to update that and so on, but it is something we have done, and we will shift our engagement strategy, I think, quite considerably to actually fall in line with that to actually ensure implementation.